Let's talk about Elantris. Colo? So as you may or may not know, this year, 2023, I am rereading all of the Cosmere, including Elantris, which is the first published Cosmere novel, first published novel by Brandon Sanderson at all, going all the way back to 2005. So if you haven't read Elantris yet, this is going to be a spoiler-free review, my thoughts on it, if you should read it, if you shouldn't read it, what you can get out of it, that sort of thing. So let's get into it. So what is the book even about? In Elantris, for a little backstory, there was once this magical, glowing, massive city, and it was inhabited by pretty much gods, demigods. Their skins glowed, their hair glowed, they could do just absolutely incredibly powerful magic. They could heal any wound, they could turn anything into food or any other material, they could transport themselves instantaneously across the world. They could do all kind of crazy magic stuff. And they also kind of pretty much lived a long time, forever-ish. And the surrounding people pretty much worship them as gods. And anyone could become an Elantrian, which is what the people were called once they ascended to that kind of glowing being. But yes, anyone could be going about their normal lives and then one day just wake up glowing skin and full of magic. And once you did that, then you moved into the city of Elantris and you became an Elantrian. That's pretty much how that worked. And it was great. Everyone loved it. It was wonderful. And then, 10 years before our story in the book starts, there was this thing that happened and the magic died. We don't know exactly why the magic died, but it died. The city is crumbling and just covered in slime and grime. The Elantrians lost their glow and their skin became patchy and ugly, and they lost all of their glowing, beautiful hair. They couldn't do their magic anymore. It was bad. The people didn't take that very well. They actually ended up overthrowing the Elantrians once that happened and murdering most of them and imprisoning them in the city of Elantris. But people kept turning into Elantrians at this point. So where in the past you would wake up glowing and full of magical powers, now you would wake up with spotty, ugly skin and your hair falling out and pretty much cursed. Your heart didn't beat, any wounds that you suffered would never heal, so you would keep feeling that pain forever. Just not a good thing. And once you turned into an Elantrian now, they burned all your stuff and kicked you into the city and locked the gates behind you. So that's the world that we're coming into when the book of Elantris starts. And in this world, we're following three main characters. We're following Riordan, who is the crown prince of the newly formed kingdom that popped up after Elantris fell. We're also following his soon-to-be bride, Serene, from a neighboring kingdom across the sea. And then we're also following Rathan, who is a priest. He wears a lot of armor. It's a very militaristic type religion, and he is coming into the area trying to convert everyone or else. And right off the bat, our Prince Charming, Prince Riordan, wakes up and he has gone through the change as now a cursed Elantrian. And they kick him into the city, lock the gates behind him, tell everyone he died. Meanwhile, his fiancée is already on the way over. She actually gets to the city about the time they kick him out of the city and into Elantris. Funny thing about her wedding contract, though, is a political wedding. It's supposed to be, uniting the two kingdoms. It had a little clause in it, is, if anything happens to either one of them, death, before the wedding, then that's as good as saying I do, and the wedding is binding. But now she is a widow without ever meeting her husband in this foreign kingdom, and she just kind of got to figure it out. Thankfully, she is extremely smart and cunning when it comes to political maneuvering and those sort of things. Also arriving in the city at the same time is Rathan, the priest who's been sent to convert everyone or else. And those two, Serene and Rathan, they kind of battle each other out on the political field for the majority of this book. And Riordan is in Elantris trying to make the best of that and trying to figure out the mystery of the magic and what happened and how to fix it and all this kind of stuff. So that's basically your setup for the book. Now for some good things and some bad things about the book. And yes, I'm a huge Brandon Sanderson fan, but this book does have some issues. It was his first published book way back in 2006. But with that being said, we'll get right into some of the things that are a bit of a drawback to this specific book. One is the pacing. So Brandon Sanderson is known these days for these massive 400,000 word books, 10 book long series with multiple novellas thrown in there. He tells really long stories, okay? He's not known for standalones, which this is, and it shows. So he tries to cover a lot of the big themes that he covers in his other books like Stormlight Archives and Mistborn and things like that, but it's all condensed into one book. And that can kind of have the effect, or it did for me, where parts of this book felt like it was giving me a summary on a Brandon Sanderson novel instead of his true voice shining through. It was more, how can we condense this down? So it reads in some parts to me a bit like a Brandon Sanderson summary. And with that, you lose some of, what's now iconically Brandon Sanderson's voice that you can get in his books. I mean, you pick up one of his new books, you can instantly tell who the author is by the way it's written. Just that voice comes through so clearly, and it just hadn't quite developed when he wrote Elantris. The other thing that it really affects is the pacing of the story. So with Elantris, there are some parts where the pacing's it's a little tough to get through. It slows down in some parts, and it's just not as neatly put together as some of his later works. Also, a negative that's not really Brandon Sanderson's fault, the audiobook. If you're used to reading his other cosmere books and you are loving the narration in them, you may just want to read this one instead of listening to it, because the narration is, to me, not nearly at the level of the other books. Now that's out of the way, let's talk about the good stuff in this book. And there's plenty of good stuff. I mean, it's Brandon Sanderson, let's be honest. First and foremost, the magic system. We got a hard magic system, lots of complicated parts to it. It works in a very systematic way, like you expect a Brandon Sanderson magic system to work. Nailed it. There's mystery. What happened to the magic system? How can we figure it out? That whole what happened to the magic totally works for me. Love that plot line throughout the book. I'm a big mystery fan. I like not knowing. It frustrates me, but I enjoy it at the same time. The characters, while not as fleshed out as something you would get in Stormlight Archives, there's at least one character that really does stand out to me, and that's Wraithen. His character arc through this book is just wonderful, wonderful to read. I love him as a character. Even though he's, the antagonist to this whole story, I want to read more about him. He's by far the most interesting character in this book and stands up, I think, to any character from any of Sanderson's books. And let's not forget, this is a Cosmere book. So if you are a Cosmere fan, if you've already read through all the Stormlight, all the Mistborn, this is pretty much required reading for you if you're a Cosmere fan. It's not very heavy in the Cosmere connections. Nowhere near as close as something like The Lost Metal or Tress of the Emerald Sea. No, this was very much first book published. Cosmere connections was way, 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 way in the background of this book, but they're there. And Elantrian magic system is one we know probably the least amount of any of the magic systems that we've currently seen, and is becoming more and more important in these later books that we're getting into. And going back and reading this, either for the first time or rereading it like I did, just starts to put some more pieces into place for it. So if you're into the Cosmere, this does have some Cosmere connections to it. And of course we see our favorite world hopping beggar in this one as too. He makes a very small appearance, but he's there. So in all, It's not my favorite Cosmere book. I don't think it's Brandon Sanderson's strongest piece of writing. I think he would probably agree on that as well. Some pacing issues, some characters could be fleshed out a little more. It's a very condensed story. He'd probably turn it into a 15-book series if he was to rewrite it. But that being said, I do recommend reading it. It's a good book. It's not a great book, but it's a good book. And if you're a Cosmere fan especially, it's required reading, in my opinion. And be sure to subscribe to the channel because I got more Cosmere stuff coming up. A couple more videos on Elantris with the magic system, the other magic systems in the world, a full Cosmere connection breakdown of Elantris, and a lot more fun stuff coming up. So be subscribed, be looking out for that, and I will see y'all in the next one.